All right, first up, the San Antonio Spurs selected Victor Wembanyama at number one. Really, anything else they did on the night was gravy. But at 33, they actually selected Leonard Miller, who dropped quite a lot. I had him at 18 on my board. They ended up trading Miller to the Timberwolves for 2 future seconds. Maybe just a cost-cutting move, or they have a lot of young guys. I like Miller. Not sure why he fell this far, but yeah, I guess hopefully he's not. Hopefully for the Spurs' sake. Well, they have Wembanyama, so it's not going to really matter. But they're probably thinking Miller's not going to be much in the future anyway, from their perspective. And then at 44, they got City Sissoko, who, yeah, that's fine. I had him as a second-round pick. I don't know why they wouldn't just keep Miller and they decided to keep Sissoko at 44. It's a little bit strange, but regardless, getting Wembanyama, obviously a huge win for the Spurs, and yeah, that could make them a contender in the near future, so good for them. I'm not really doing grades, but if I was giving a grade, they get an A just because they got the best player in the draft, and everybody else in their shoes would have made the same decision, but still, they got that lottery luck, and they get Vic, so good for the Spurs. All right, so next up, let's talk about the Hornets. The Hornets had an extremely busy night, involved in a bunch of picks and some trades. Obviously, up at the top at number 2, they selected Brandon Miller. I had Scoot there. It is what it is. I'm not going to kill him. I thought Miller and Scoot were pretty close, and they ended up going with Miller. And, it's arguably a better fit with LaMelo. So, can't really knock him too much for that. Further down, at 27 they drafted Nick Smith. I think so now they have the funny combo of Nick Smith Jr. and Dennis Smith Jr. Can't have too many Smith Jr.'s. I had Nick Smith around, I think, 30. Yeah, I actually had him the last pick of the first round. So 27. That's about where I expect him to go, actually, and that's if you can't get Scoot, I guess you get Nick Smith Jr. as a consolation prize. Further down, they drafted Colby Jones, but they traded him to the Kings, so, not a super important pick in my mind. I was happy to see Mo Gay get drafted, actually at 39 by the Hornets, and he ended up being traded to the Hawks. That's probably good for him in the long run, but happy to see Mo Gay drafted. And then at 41, actually, they selected Amari Bailey and kept him. And I think that's actually a really good pickup because I had Amari Bailey higher than Nick Smith. I don't exactly remember. I think around 25 or something like that, or 28. So that's a pretty good value there at 41. So on the night, they end up with Brandon Miller, Nick Smith, and Amari Bailey. That's actually a pretty good haul. They otherwise, Hornets are kind of a mess, and they have a ton of guards, and it'll be interesting to see if they ever get it together. I guess MJ's selling team, but overall, good night for Charlotte. They definitely added quite a bit of talent, so yeah, we'll be excited to see some of these guys play. I think I don't know how long. I never really loved Book Night, so I kind of feel like both Nick Smith and Amari Bailey might beat out Book Night fairly quickly. So I'll be super interested to see how that goes. All right, so the Portland Trailblazers were winners on the night. They were the beneficiary of Charlotte passing on Brandon Miller. And with the number 3 pick, they could select Scoot Henderson, who fell to them. And I had him at number 2, and I think that's, regardless of having Damian Lillard and whatever that situation is, whether they trade Scoot or not, it was the best value there. And, personally, I feel like they should move on from Lillard maybe many years ago. And they should still do that and just, build around Scoot. I think, and at 23, they added Chris Murray, which I think that's good value there. Maybe that's around where he was mocked, but I had him up at 16. So I think he's going to be a solid player, honestly. And then down at 43, they selected Ryan Rupert, or Ryan, I don't know, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, from the Breakers, New Zealand Breakers. I honestly did not scout him, and don't really regret it because he ended up being a mid-second round pick. So that pick is whatever to me. So again, I think Blazers were actually one of the big winners on the night. I mean, getting Scoot. They didn't have to do anything for it except, get third in the lottery, and it just worked out for them. But I think getting Chris Murray at 23 was, like I said, that's a nice pick. So good night for the Portland Trail Blazers. So next up, we have the Houston Rockets, who selected Amen Thompson at number 4, and then Cam Whitmore, who slid all the way to 20. Let's talk about Amen. So, I had the Thompson twins at 14 to 15. I actually had his brother, Ausar at 14, and Amen at 15. I'm just pretty agnostic on these two guys. I hope it works out. I would have taken... I had Taylor Hendricks at 4, so that was my pick for them. I would have had a bunch of other guys before taking them in. I hope it works out. It's pretty insane that... Well, let's talk about Cam Whitmore. So he slid. I had Cam at 12, so getting him at 20, technically, that's a good value. But apparently he slid, with all kinds of flags. And just the playing styles that they're going to have. I call it the NBA's new version of Squid Games. Because... You have all these guys who need to slash towards the basket, still don't really have any real point guard unless you really believe Amen is a point guard. You have all like Jalen Green, Amen, Cam, Kevin Porter Jr. That is just going to be a crate, and not to mention that they picked like Ty Washington last year, who probably will never get on the court again. Josh Christopher, probably, like a lot of these guys are going to have to be traded. I don't know how it's all going to work out. I mean, there's a lot of physical talent, but I just don't see how they improved as a basketball team necessarily. Maybe Amen is just really incredible, like everyone seems to think he is, and he'll turn it all around for them. Honestly, for me, it seems like a shit show, but we'll see. There must be praying for Amen to be as good as his name sounds. And then Cam Whitmore, you have to hope that the flags weren't as bad as they seem to be. But at 20, I can't really blame them for that pick. Hopefully it works out for them. So Houston, I can't really call them winners on the night because I feel like I would have done something else to improve the team. They got, guys who are physically talented. I just don't know if they got the best basketball players that they could get. All right, so from one Thompson twin to the other, the Detroit Pistons at 5 selected Amen's brother, Ausar. As I just said, I was lower on him, and I would have taken, at that point, Taylor Hendricks was on the board. Between him and Grady Dick, who I actually had in my mock going to Detroit, I would have chosen one of those guys. I think either of them would have been better choices than Ausar, who, he may be the better shooting of the Thompson twins, but that doesn't mean he can shoot. So that team, continues to just add sort of physical talents, and not sure how it's going to work together. They also, at 25, they got Marcus Sasser. So the Grizzlies drafted Marcus Sasser and traded him to Detroit. I wasn't a huge Sasser fan, but he's pretty legit point guard that can shoot. He could probably help them. So that seems like a pretty good pickup there. And then mercifully, they drafted James Nagy, a Euro center, but they didn't keep him. So the last thing they really need is another center. So they traded Nagy to the Hornets, who also have a lot of centers. So overall in the night, I think Detroit, just like I said for Houston, I don't think I'd call them winners. Not necessarily losers, but I just think with that fifth pick, they could have done something better. But, again, other people are so high in the Thompson twins, maybe they'll surprise me, and maybe it'll all work out. And I think Marcus Sasser, he's a chance to be an NBA player for sure. So, interesting night for Detroit. So Orlando overall had a good night. I think they were one of the winners on the night, honestly. They got Anthony Black at 6. I really like Anthony Black. I had him at 7. And then they got Jet Howard at 11. And I was super high on Jet Howard. I had him at 6 going to Orlando. So they kind of, they ended up getting Jet. I think knowing where he was mocked, it was likely that he was going to go lower. But he actually ended up going, they took him higher than he was in general. The consensus mock was that he was going to go in the teens. It made sense to do what they did. And I think maybe the only way to improve on their draft in terms of like reflecting my board would have been at 6, Taylor Hendricks was still available. So they could have gotten Taylor Hendricks, and then at 11 they could have taken Grady Dick was still on the board at 11, but they did address one of their needs, with shooting, and arguably Taylor Hendricks, doesn't really work or fit as well with Paolo and Franz, maybe that, and Wendell Carter Jr. So you could argue from a fit perspective, it kind of makes sense to get Black where they did. He's a great player, great talent, really good feel. The shooting is a question, and Orlando already has shooting questions, but I do think they helped themselves on the night by getting Jet, who I really like. Maybe Grady Dick there would have been a little bit better fit. Like I said, a little bit more optimal, but I still think Orlando added quite a bit of talent tonight, or last night. So good night for them. All right, up next, the Indiana Pacers had a super busy night. So at 7, they actually picked Bilal Coulibaly, but traded him immediately to the Wizards, who we'll get to next. They traded him for Jarris Walker. So the Pacers end up with Jarris Walker at 8, or really at 7. I would have taken Taylor Hendricks there. I think that would have been a really incredible fit for Indiana. I think I probably also would have taken Grady Dick. But, Jarris can be plugged in at the 4. And I think if you watch my other video, I might have made the comp to, at some point, to Paul Millsap. I think that's kind of what you're hoping for. Hopefully he's mobile enough to play the 4 full time. I assume Indiana thinks so, and with Miles Turner there, he can shoot. So it's relieves a little bit of the pressure on Jarris to shoot, but really eventually I think he's going to need to shoot as well. So yeah, I wasn't quite as high on Jarris as Hendricks. I think that would have been the better fit, but it's not a terrible outcome. I still like Jarris. I like his feel. Should be fun with him and Halliburton there in terms of passing. So Jarris Walker. And then let's recap the other moves. At 26, the Pacers drafted Ben Shepherd from Belmont. I really never got into Ben Shepherd. He's kind of been on my radar for a long time, but every time I would look into it, I just kind of didn't really feel it. I think he's probably... My guess is he's a shooting fraud. I think his free throw percentage was never very good, and I'm always skeptical of so-called shooters who don't shoot well from the free throw line. And then they selected Julian Strawther a couple of picks later at 29-32. So they selected Strawther and Jalen Pickett at 32, traded both of those guys to the Nuggets. And then... let's see, they were involved in a Maxwell Lewis trade, but didn't end up with him. And then kind of oddly traded for Mojave King from the G League Ignite, who I didn't think was very super interesting at all. So really the main move on the night to me was picking Jarris Walker over Taylor Hendricks. And I think, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time. Okay, so the Washington Wizards, as I just mentioned, they trade Jarris Walker at 8 for Bilal Coulibaly at 7. So they really had a hard-on for the Victor Wembanyama's teammate, Bilal Coulibaly. I personally don't get it. I had him around 20, something like that. I think going to Houston because they're kind of, it's a lottery ticket. 7 just seems so high when there were guys like Taylor Hendricks on the board. Jarris Walker was on the board. Could have just taken Jarris Walker. Casey Wallace, Jett Howard. I just had a lot of other people in front of Bilal Coulibaly. So, I hope that works out for them. Him and Poole next year, it's gonna be it's gonna be a dumpster fire in Washington for quite some time. But I guess that's nothing new to them. And then the other picks they made, at 42 they drafted Tristan Vukcevic from Belgrade, I guess. I think that's Serbia. He's the guy. He's the big guy. Looked good, pretty good at the combine shooting. Kind of interesting pick there. Can't hate on that one. And then they helped out my Warriors by trading Trace Jackson Davis at 57. Maybe they could have used Trace Jackson Davis, but anyway, traded him to the Warriors. So overall, I didn't really love what the Wizards did, but of course that all hinges on this Bilal Coulibaly guy, and I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid yet. Maybe he's going to be awesome. Maybe he's the next Sean Marion. Time will tell. All right, so the Utah Jazz, to me, were big winners on the night. I really think Danny Ainge hit a home run here with his draft. Taylor Hendricks at 9, that's it's funny because that's pretty much where he was mocked, and he was much higher on my board. But I mean, I think a lot of people are going to regret. A lot of teams are going to regret passing on him. And then Keontae George at 16. I had Keontae George around, I think, 8. So it's like a perfect landing spot for him. In fact, I might have had Keontae George going to let me check real quick. Yeah, I actually had Keontae George going to Utah at 9, and they got him at 16. So to me, I mean, it's not a steal in terms of where he was mocked, but in terms of value from my board, it's pretty good. And then even at 28, Bryce Sensabaugh, who I had him around there on my board as well. I think I had him going at like 25, but that's a low risk. I don't want to say necessarily high reward, but Sensabaugh could end up being a player who fell for just sort of like physical reasons, some injury stuff and just being kind of weird. But maybe in Utah, they turned Lauri Markkanen into basically a star. So yeah, I think Utah rolled tonight. Good for them. At number 10, the Dallas Mavericks actually drafted Cason Wallace, but then immediately traded him to the Thunder for Derek Lively II. I think this is a really nice pick. I had mocked Derek Lively to the Mavs. I think he could really help with their defense and be a good pick and roll partner for Luka, eventually at least. I think the only question or interesting, fun debate, I guess at this point, Grady Dick and Cason Wallace, really, they're both still on the board. I think they could have went in either of those directions, or Lively. I think you could have a really good argument for all three of those being helpful to the Mavs because they could just use a lot more talent to help Luka. But I think with Lively at 10, that's a good pick. Honestly, I really have to think on it. I might have ended up with Grady Dick there, but I think Lively, it's so close. I like that pick. I really like Derek Lively as a prospect. And then they traded for, they got from the Kings, Olivier Maxence Prosper at pick 24. He was kind of hyped towards the end of the process, starting with the combine. I didn't really have him I think I had him like mid-second roundish, somewhere in late 30s. So, he's seems like a defensive prospect. And, if his shooting improves, maybe he could be a Dorian Finney-Smith type of player. So I guess we'll see. But good night overall for the Mavs. So we have the Thunder. As I just said, they end up trading Derek Lively the second for Cason Wallace. I don't know if Sam Presti is just like allergic to shooting, like to ever having any shooters on his team. I mean, I'm hoping Cason will shoot, but it's just they have, Shea and Jalen Williams and Giddey. Like, none of these guys are elite shooters or even really above average shooters, 3-point shooters. And adding Cason Wallace to the mix, I don't know. I think I just would have gone for Grady Dick. Like, he was available. He was on the board. I mean, they could have also had Jet Howard. Like, they could have had the Mavs draft Jet Howard for them. So I like Cason Wallace, but I'm not sure I'm a fan of this pick for the Thunder. But I do hope that Cason Wallace has a good career. I just think it's honestly not the best spot for him. But we'll see. And then at 37, they draft Hunter Tyson, but traded him to the Nuggets. And then at 50, they drafted Keontae Johnson to keep for themselves. I don't have much to say about Keontae Johnson. Super athletic. I think he, if you remember, he was, I think, at Florida, and he had some heart issues. So he had a good season last year in a comeback. Not a great shooter, really good athlete though. Once you get in the 50s, it's kind of there's not much hope really for prospects who get taken in the 50s. So not gonna dwell on that one. But yeah, Cason Wallace, I feel like it's not the best starting place for his career, but I really hope it works out. All right, so the Toronto Raptors at 13, the team that needs a shooter, got arguably the best shooter in the draft, Grady Dick. He was 5th in my mock draft. He fell into their laps with that amazing red sequins Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz suit. This guy's a baller. I think this is just a great fit and really good value here. Again, I think he was mocked around this area, so not great value from the value standpoint of where he was going to be drafted, but on my board he was much higher. So perfect fit, just a home run in my opinion, and that was their only move on the night, but it was a really good one. So I love Dick. So at 14, the New Orleans Pelicans selected Jordan Hawkins. I bet they were praying for Grady Dick to fall one more spot. He didn't. If you saw my mock draft the other day, right before the actual draft night, I had Hawkins going 17 to the Lakers, which would have been a really good fit. I'm not a huge Hawkins fan. I think at this point, if we look at what I had on the board. I think Keontae George was still on the board. Probably would have gone there. I guess Jet Howard was already gone. Podziemski. So Podziemski I had at 15. I had Chris Murray at 16. I think those would have been better picks, honestly. Well, you could argue, with Trey Murphy already there, and Herb, that maybe Chris Murray didn't make as much sense. But Podziemski, I mean, you're getting a point guard and a shooter. I think that might have been a really good pick there. So, Hawkins, I mean, he's a good shooter. I don't know how you're going to play him in McCollum, but maybe you don't really care about that for now, or especially long term. So, I don't know. I'd give it that's like a B pick to me. But he's definitely a good shooter. Okay, so at 15, the Atlanta Hawks selected Kobe Buffkin. He had been rising up draft boards, probably, I mean, even starting before the combine. I think by the end of the cycle, like, for me, he was a little bit overrated. I ended up having him in the early 20s, like around 23, 24, something like that. No, I had him going 21 to Brooklyn. Okay, so I wasn't that much lower than consensus, but I was a bit lower. I think it's a weird fit actually for the Hawks because he's behind Trey and Murray, like in that backcourt, and with his questions about shooting. I mean, I guess you could play him next to Trey. It'll be harder to play him next to Murray. So I think it's a little bit of a weird fit. I honestly, just thinking about it off the top of my head, like at this point in the draft, I think I had Cam at 12 on my board, and he was obviously falling. Maybe this might have been the spot to sort of take a little bit more of a risk and just go with Cam, honestly. I like Podziemski. I had higher too. So like, if you're going for a guard who could shoot, they weren't really going for a guard who could shoot. I think they could have gone with Podziemski here instead of Bufkin. So I don't love the pick. It's okay. Again, this is like a B minus. Not the best use of a draft pick in my opinion. I do like Kobe though, and I just think he got a little bit overhyped during the cycle. So at 17, the Lakers selected Jalen Hood-Schifino. Not super surprising pick. I had Jordan Hawkins mocked there because I thought they could use a shooter. I kind of get what they like about Jalen Hood-Schifino. I mean, he kind of has that NBA frame, and they like size, and he kind of navigates screens well on offense and defense. So I could see how, like, maybe LeBron saw some video and was like, "Hey, this kid's a hooper." But he's not really a shooter, and they have Austin Reeves. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, I feel like if you wanted to go for another guard there, Podziemski again would have been a better pick with more shooting, and Chris Murray would have been, a nice compliment there, like to give you a shooter in a way that Hachimura is not. Still, I don't really believe in his shooting. I think Chris Murray would have been a nice fit there, and he was still on the board. So I don't know. This to me is like a B minus. Honestly, even a C plus. If you're trying to win now, I don't think he was the best pick for that. But we'll see. I wasn't an Austin Reeves fan, and didn't really think much of him. So LA, they have some good scouts there. So we'll see. And then later, they took Max Lewis, or they traded for Max Lewis. From the Nuggets via the Pacers at 40. You can't do much harm at 40. But I'm not a Max Lewis guy. But that's probably, maybe even a little lower than I would have taken him. I might have punted on him. Pepperdine was so bad, and his defense is so bad. I just don't know. I really had a lot of hope for him coming into the sophomore season, but he feels like just a big time kind of empty stats guy. But we'll see. And then they traded Mojave King to the Pacers, so not much there. So yeah, on the whole, as a Warriors fan, I guess probably a good night for me, because I think they could have done a better job. All right, so at 18, Miami Heat make the maybe the most predictable pick in the draft with their one and only selection. They took Jaime Jaquez. The meme Heat culture, it's like so obvious. Jaime Jaquez is like the quintessential Heat culture guy. But I think maybe they made a little bit of a mistake not taking Podziemski, because I think he's a super Heat culture guy too. And a better shooter. I think Jaquez will be good if he can shoot, but I think that's a real question after 4 years. I just can't trust his shooting, so I would not have taken him there. I get why they did, because of Heat culture. Still, I think this is like a B. I had Jaime going a little bit lower than this. Glad they didn't take Podziemski. Chris Murray, again, was still on the board. Maybe not so much Heat culture, but a more of a chance of shooting. There was no way they were going to take Cam Whitmore at this point. So, yeah, not much else to say about Jaime Jaquez. I do like him. I've been following him since his freshman year, and I was always hoping he'd become a better shooter. And maybe when he goes to Miami, he'll get in the lab, and Butler will kick his ass, and he'll start to shoot. All right, so at 19, my Golden State Warriors selected Brandon Podziemski. I think that's probably the pick I would have made. So I think it was between, at that point for me, it would have been between him and Chris Murray. I keep bringing up Chris Murray because I had them right around the same range. I think the only question in my mind, and just as an outside, just a note that I in the mock I had Podziemski and Chris Murray going a little bit higher, so I had the Warriors taking Dariq Whitehead at 19, which would have been sort of the more long-term thinking pick in my mind. But there was no way they were going to select an 18-year-old in this draft. So Podziemski, I think, steps in as a Dante DiVincenzo, Ty Jerome replacement. I think Kerr's going to love him. It's the only thing is the pick was made a little bit more complicated by the fact that they just traded Jordan Poole for Chris Paul and got really small. Now, when you think about the backcourt of Golden State, now you have Chris Paul, Gary Payton, Moody, and Podziemski. They really need to add some more size. So I think Chris Murray might have been the more seamless fit, to be honest. But I really, it would have been so close. It would have been tough for me to pass Podziemski. So I don't know. I still think definitely they made a good pick compared to, what was left on the board. So I'll be super interested to see how this turns out this season and in the future. Okay, so at 21, the Brooklyn Nets selected Noah Clowney. And then they followed that up at 22 with Dariq Whitehead. I think these are fine picks. I mean, I had Clowney... I actually had Clowney going a couple picks later to Portland, and I had the thing is I had Brooklyn taking Kobe Buffkin and Bilal Coulibaly. Both were off the board. I had Dariq Whitehead at 19, so he was still on the board. The only other guy to even consider at this point, well, there would have been a couple. So there would have been Leonard Miller and Chris Murray. I probably would have taken a shot at Leonard Miller since they had 2 picks to kind of toss out there and just shoot some darts. But I think Clowney and the other guy would have been Chris Murray. But they have Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges, so I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not as interesting to them to take Chris Murray. So I really think they took two shots here, two sort of. I don't want to say high risk, but, project. I mean, they basically took 2 projects with upside. And Dariq Whitehead was like, I don't know, number 1 in his class or something like that. And here, at this point in the draft, I think these are fine picks that could turn out to be really interesting in a few years. So, and then I think at 51, they took Jalen Wilson. I've never been a fan of Jalen Wilson, and it's in the 50s, so it's kind of irrelevant to me. But yeah, I'd say overall Brooklyn had a pretty good night with those 2 guys. All right, so with that, I've covered most teams that were, so many teams had multiple picks. We've covered pretty much all of them. I'm just going to give a few quick hits here of some other lingering stuff. The Clippers ended up taking Kobe Brown with the 30th pick. I think Kobe Brown to me was really more like a 2nd round pick, so I don't know. That's whatever. Let's see here. I think teams that I haven't covered yet. Looks like the Bulls ended up getting Julian Phillips in a trade. So Celtics drafted Julian Phillips at 35, traded him to the Bulls. I had Julian Phillips around late 1st round, so I think that's a pretty good pickup. Then the Hornets drafted Colby Jones at 34 and I guess traded him to the Kings. Seems like there's some uncertainty there. Wasn't a Colby Jones fan, so I don't know. That's whatever. What else do we have here? The Kings drafted Jordan Walsh at 38 and traded him to the Celtics. I like Jordan Walsh. I had him also late 20s, I think around 27 or something like that. So that's a pretty nice pick or trade, I think, for the Celtics to get Walsh. Let's see, what else do we have here? Grizzlies took G.G. Jackson at 45. That's probably his floor was around there. I wasn't a G.G. Jackson fan, but at that point in the draft, maybe worth taking a shot, see what he is. Clippers also took Jordan Miller at 48. Wasn't a Jordan Miller guy. Cavs took Emoni Bates at 49. Whatever. I think we've hit on most things. I feel like there's one guy I'm missing here. Let's see here. Kings. Yeah, another nice pick. Well, so at 54, the Kings selected Jalen Slauson. I liked him a lot more than this. I mean, I might have drafted him like 20 spots higher, to be honest. So I think, again, whenever anybody's taking the 50s, it's a pretty bad sign. But I did like Jalen Slauson. T-Wolves took Jalen Clark at 53. Jalen Clark, sort of interesting if he ever learns to shoot. Good defender, or good defense potentially. And the Bucks took Chris Livingston. I don't understand. They took him in the last pick in the draft. I don't know why he didn't return. And I think another couple UDFAs that I'd point out real quick. I believe the Lakers ended up with Colin Castle. They gave Colin Castleton a two-way. So I thought that was a nice sneaky good two-way. And then I think Terquavion Smith got a two-way from the Sixers. He got a two-way from the Sixers. So I was a little bit surprised that Terquavion went undrafted. I don't think many people talked about it on draft night, but he's a good example of a guy who really he should have come out last year. I think he might have been drafted late first round. Certainly, I think he would have gotten drafted in the first half of the second round last year. He returned to school. Clearly his stock dropped a lot, which is unfortunate because he kind of showed that he was more of a playmaker than people thought. But, you take a risk coming back. I mean, not only injury, but just, if you need to work on something like, let's say, shooting, and you don't shoot that well, which happens, then your stock drops. And I think that's what happened. And, he came back. He didn't put on any weight, so it's unfortunate. I hope he can find a landing spot. I mean, if it's not Philadelphia, maybe somewhere else. But yeah, I do like Terquavion. Just his NBA future is, I guess, pretty uncertain at this point. And then another guy I mentioned in the mock I did before last week was this week was Tavion Kinsey. I think he got a Exhibit 10 from Utah, something like that. Yeah, he got Exhibit 10, so he's one to watch in Summer League. Oh yeah, and then Charles Bediako also got an Exhibit 10 from the Spurs. So I don't know how much playing time he's going to get behind Wemby, but yeah, at least in Summer League we'll get to see him. So that's it for now. I enjoyed the draft. It was quite a lot of surprises up and down, and that pretty much marks the end of the draft season. Although I may do another video after Summer League, maybe with some observations of that. So hope you enjoyed this, and otherwise I will see you later.